Hello and welcome back to Geeky Port, your safe harbor in the world of nerddom. We've been doing a bit of a folklore series, monster series if you will. We've covered vampires, werewolves, ghosts, and on tonight's episode, we're continuing that folklore discussion by exploring the world of fairies. I am here with my co-host, Amy McFarlane.
What's up? I don't know. I'm normal. Hi.
It's going to be very chaotic on today's episode because we're talking about fairies, and also we're chaotic as human beings. So yeah, let's just jump into it. Like, let's examine. Let's let the audience know like what exactly fairies are. I know that the word itself is derived from the word for fate. So maybe that points us towards the direction of the purpose, what fairies are meant to do, or what powers they hold over the mortal world. But what's your take?
Also, they're tiny little people with wings.
Almost predominantly tiny people, right? And with insect wings, right?
Yeah, they're very humanoid, tiny people with wings, unless you watch some darker fantasy stuff, and then they're less humanoid, but still tiny wings, arms, and legs.
That's actually an interesting point, because I eventually wanted to talk about William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, but the fairies in that are human-sized, and I wonder if that was just based on the limitations of theater. Of course, if you're doing like a big budget movie, you could do like CGI and whatnot. But all the fairies are just like the size of normal humans, right?
I mean, yeah, which would make sense for the fact that actors are human size, and there was no CGI at the time or green screen. But in other films and stuff I've seen, like with Titania and Oberon, at least, they're also human size. Like the very well produced and not at all stupid film The Changeling, starring Angelina Jolie.
Oh, yes.
Or her as Maleficent. A lot of Angelina Jolie.
That's right, she was a fairy in that.
Yes. So Maleficent is a full human size fairy. The fairies in that are full human size, and both the live action and the animated. But then they also shrink down in the animated. Oh, maybe the live action. I haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah, I think if you go back to like the original, like English or even pre-English, like Celtic concept of fairies, they are almost universally diminutive. So, like, I mean, I don't know if they're all like Tinkerbell sized, but they all have that in common. Dwarves, gnomes, elves, not to be confused with Tolkien's elves, who are very tall. Those are based more on like the Norse legends. Alfs, I believe they're referred to in the sagas. But yeah, they're usually like tiny creatures. They usually have insect wings and are almost universally mischievous in nature.
Yeah, like so a little bit of lore about me. I listen to a lot of ASMR on YouTube. And there is one person that I follow where they had found a book on fairies and all the different types. And like the video was just her reading it, and it was showing like and describing in great detail the illustrations in it, and it talked about like things like brownies and like different members of the Fae realm. And yeah, they were all described as small, but at the same time, as far as we know, because they aren't real, because unless there is absolute scientific proof that something doesn't exist, I believe it could exist at some point.
Nice.
Like unicorns, technically, we found fossils that prove the existence of something like one, but not in the way that we picture them, like horse horn. So.
Yeah, You and I had a discussion a year or two ago now about cryptids, like cryptozoology in general. But like, I don't think there is any like photo or video imagery, like captured evidence of fairies. Like, or at least it isn't popularized in the same way that like Bigfoot or ghosts or
Yeah.
chupacabra is.
I mean, also in tradition of the last few videos that we've done, I'm going to talk about Supernatural. In and the fairy episode of Supernatural, spoilers, show's been off the air for 4 years. Um, Everyone in this town believes it's aliens. Like they see lights, that people go disappearing and come back slightly off, like as if they were abducted, and they have like these crazy visions of like these creatures around them and everything. Turns out it was fairies, because that's aliens are crazy. There's no such thing. Fairies instead. And they were in both senses, that like there were ones that were human size in the sense of like maybe between 4'10" and like 5'4" height.
Sure.
But, and then you also saw like the worker fairies, which were like the lesser like status fairies that were the tiny little creatures.
Okay.
And they also really leaned into a lot of known lore about fairies, which is like things like if you spill sugar or salt, they have to stop and count it, all the grains.
Oh, okay.
And that's how you stop them.
Okay.
But yeah.
I know that particular bit of lore was applied to vampires in some traditions as well. There's an X-Files episode about that, where like this actual vampire is like pursuing someone through a, I think, convenience store, and then in order to get away, the person that's being pursued knocks over an entire jar of straws, and the vampire's like, "Oh, why'd you have to go and do that?" And he gets down on the floor and he's like, 1, 2.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened in the Supernatural episode, where it was literally like, he just looked at him like, how dare you? And then he just slowly lowers to the ground and starts picking them up one by one. So
Maybe that's what the Count from Sesame Street has. He's one of those vampires.
hey, or maybe just counting is fun because math is cool.
That is cool. Speaking of, like going to like the dark side of fairies, or like the Christian concept of fairies, King James the First, who was obsessed with the supernatural and the occult. In fact, William Shakespeare specifically wrote the Scottish play for him. That's why there's so much witchcraft and supernatural elements. In his book that he published called Demonology, he has a chapter about fairies in which he equates them with demons, like Judeo-Christian demons that you could make pacts with and just want nothing but like just ill will towards mankind.
I mean, that kind of like lends itself to, I can't remember what it was that I watched, and I wish I could, but it was so long ago. It was a film I watched where the fairies very much were like, kind of like Tinkerbell in the sense of like, a little mean. Not necessarily like...
Not evil.
Like evil,
not
like
satanic.
Taking the lives of people or anything. But they weren't like, oh, look how sweet those little things are, and if I'm nice to them, they'll be nice to me. It was very much like if you come into their realm or into their zone, they'll attack and scratch and like, kind of like how you get attacked by like a bird, you know.
That's interesting. So in that respect, like fairies are like almost as animalistic as they are, albeit tiny, humanoid.
Yeah.
I know that there are old traditions of fairies from Celtic lore, and I believe they were originally called she, and because Celtic is, spelt a lot differently than it is pronounced. Spelled Sidhe, if I remember correctly, but it's pronounced she. But the Sidhe had two courts, the Seelie court and the unseelie court. Seelie court could have like mischievous fairies, but they were predominantly beneficial, especially if you like laid out like bowls of like milk or honey for them. You know, if you did good things would be returned to you, like a law of like equal reciprocity. And then the unseelie court, they were malevolent and they only wanted terrible things to happen to mankind. And also by extension, the Seelie court.
Yeah, I definitely have heard those terms in regards to Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, I feel like probably I prefer like evil, vindictive, fey creatures because I find that a little more interesting than like the Disneyfied version of them where they all like, you know, playing flowers.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's examine two different versions, like, say, Tinkerbell. We'll just stay with Disney for a bit. So Tinkerbell, I would say, is like generally good, but because she thought that Wendy was coming after her man, she wanted to work, not evil, but like she wanted to like, you know, play terrible pranks on Wendy.
I mean, it depends. Are we talking about Peter Pan Tinkerbell, or are we talking about Tinkerbell and the television series and the movie series, where that's not, she's very much like, you know, well, she is her name sake, where she's a tinkerer, and then there's, you know, fairies who are in charge of like floral, and there's fairies who deal with fauna, and there's fairies who deal with music and aquatic fairies, and like that's the whole world. This is what happens when you babysit, is you learn about this stuff and you're a full adult and you go, what is this?
That's really interesting. So fairies representing like different elements. And let's explore that after the break.
Wasn't expecting you so soon.
It's not like I had anything else to do.
I didn't get your name. You said you didn't attend the showing yesterday?
No, I didn't attend your open house.
Anyhow, you're townies. That makes my job easier. I don't have to lay it on so heavy. How this area is our little secret.
About that, the marsh we passed on the way in, aren't we in a flood zone?
Base has been dumping munitions and fuel here for a while.
I see a light on. Do you have gas?
I didn't see a light.
Right there, in the basement. I see a light.
What you got there, hon?
Not really sure. Oh, what died?
You're so sensitive. It's just a little musty.
Welcome back. As always, my name is Jamie, and this is Geeky Port, and I'm here with Amy.
What?
And we are going to be continuing our discussion about fairies. So before we went to break, you made an interesting observation about fairies being connected with certain things like elements. And it reminded me of something I read long ago where there were particular fairies that were linked with elements. For example, the Undinas, which are like these mermaid type fairies, were linked with water. The sylphs were representative of the air or wind. Gnomes were creatures of the earth. And interestingly, salamanders, which perhaps were folkloric characters before they were like actual animals, were associated with fire.
Or maybe just salamanders, like the actual animal.
I mean, fire would
fairies.
immediately kill them.
You don't know that. There's the salamander in Frozen 2.
I forgot about that. I've only seen that movie once.
Oh, it's so
Unnecessary.
unnecessary. it like 40% of that could go away and it would still be enough.
Yeah, but it made $1 billion. So that means that Disney is just going to make Frozen sequels and live action adaptations of their popular animated movies till the
Yeah.
end of time.
I mean, they can't all be Hook, which is the only live action adaptation that makes me smile.
Oh, see, I really liked Jungle Book.
Someone had to.
Oh. I thought that was good, and I liked Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella. I thought that was okay.
All right.
It was unnecessary.
Yeah.
But it was well directed at the very least.
The Aladdin was good.
That was fun.
That was good.
I haven't seen it since we saw it in the movie theater, but it was a fun time at the movie theater.
Yeah, the live action's better than the Broadway play.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll say that
Okay.
out loud with my whole chest. Anyways, fairies.
Fairies.
To bring it back.
Yeah. Do you have any particular fairies that you like more than others from popular media?
Oh, from Popular Fern Gully was probably one of my favorite movies as a child.
So good.
And as a child, I mean, still one of my favorite animated films.
Who was the fairy in that? Krista?
Krista.
Yes.
Yeah. I liked I don't know what her name is, but the like old lady fairy. I thought she was cool. And then obviously Batty, which was
Right, voiced by Robin Williams.
And
yeah.
that's how I was also introduced to Tim Curry.
Oh, yes. As
That
this,
was my introduction. Hexus or something like that.
right, as the literal manifestation of like pollution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Wonderful.
that was one of my favorite movies. I think it definitely formed the type of person I became, because also one of my favorite books was The Lorax. So
Nice.
my mom was like, "Yay, a little environmentalist."
Right, right.
But yeah, I loved it. It had fun story. It had good characterization, and it just looked really cool to like live in a tree and like use mushroom caps as chairs, and you got to like love rainforest and like how beautiful the woods can be. And that's so I guess, yeah, also just like woodland fairies are probably my favorite type.
Right. Yeah, I suppose you could find like a gnome or a dwarf like underground where there's little to no vegetation, but predominantly that kind of fairy would be like, living in a tree or among toadstools.
Yeah.
Oh, toadstool rings. That's a thing, right? Is that supposed to like trap people or transport you to a fairy world?
Oh yeah, so fairy traps are my favorite thing. So there's two types. People have fairy traps, which is to catch fairies. Those are like the things that like kids make. But like there's also like when you're walking through the woods and you see like a plant and only one branch of the plant is like waving towards you, or like the branches kind of go in like look like a entryway, and it's just like to lure you in, and just like it's a trend on TikTok that if people find them, they're like, "Nice try, fairies," and then or you just see like people dragging their friends away from them, going, "Nope, that's how they get you."
Right.
But I think they're so cool, and I may or may not purposefully look for that type of stuff if I'm in nature.
That'd be a great way out, obviously, of like, paying taxes and mortgage and all that. Just like, I'm just gonna depart this world for the fairy world.
I mean, eventually they'll give you back.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you have to go though?
I don't know. I mean, I have yet to cross into the realm, so who knows?
Okay.
Or at least if I have, they're really good at erasing your memory of it.
It's probably the best to search for those types of fairies, that kind of beckoning, that supernatural beckoning, during the month of October, because as we're recording this, even if you're watching this months from now, we're recording this just a couple weeks away from Halloween.
Yes.
And traditionally, Celtically, the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest around Samhain, right?
Yeah.
That most hallowed of eves.
Or if you are the frustrating episode of, once again, Supernatural, Sam Wayne. And I'm like, oh, that's not right. I'm like, you are upsetting so many people right now.
Right. But again, the Celtic language is difficult to learn because it's spelt so
Yeah.
differently that it is pronounced. There's a punk band that emerged in the early 80s called Sam Hain, but when they say the word in their lyrics, they pronounce it Samhain. So,
Yeah.
weird.
But I mean, I love the one thing I love about this time of year, because I was at King Richard's Fair, so were you, but different day. And I just love like pointing at all the fairy wings, like fairy wings, fairy wings, fairy wings, fairy. And one year, I promise it will happen sometime. I do want to do like fairy costume but I want to go all out.
When you went, were there many people, a surprising amount of people wearing big toadstool hats?
So when we went, there was a surprising amount of people wearing jackets because it was raining.
I'm sorry.
So yeah.
Well, I guess a toadstool is a kind of
I mean, yeah,
shield from the rain.
there
It's
were a couple
kind of an umbrella in itself.
around, but we went pretty early and we left kind of early. But yeah, it was raining, so most people had some kind of cloak or jacket on, so I couldn't see what their hat was.
Okay. I just remember seeing a lot of mushroom hats, so it was a
they're
fun kind of fairy
cool.
look. Yeah. That's one thing I appreciate about Renaissance fairs. It's just, you don't have to like be period accurate. You could just wear something fun. And there are a lot of people that dress like fairies, and there's no uniform look of a fairy. You can just customize it. You could make it as colorful as you wanted, like mimic the look of butterflies or flowers, or you could be like really gothic, like an unseelie court fairy, and just be like monochromatic or all in black or all in white.
Or you can cover yourself in LED lights and be the little annoying fairy from the Zelda video games.
Oh, hey, listen. Yeah, that's also a good example of a fairy from popular culture.
Or I guess I think it's technically a sprite, if we want to be specific.
Right, sprites are usually like a little speck of light that flies around. In a similar way, will-o'-the-wisps are like these dancing lights. And I think there have been like some scientific explanations, like it's like ball lightning perhaps, or like swamp gas or something.
I don't know. One day I'll go to Scotland and I'll find out.
There we go.
I'll just follow them. And maybe my mom will turn into a bear. Brought it back to Disney.
Yeah, it's a good reference to Brave. A movie also I've only seen once, but I saw that with my mom. And it's a good movie to see with your mother.
Yeah, you really only need to see it once, I think, to remember every aspect of it. Because it sticks in there.
Yep. We could also discuss that during our witch episode.
Ah, yes.
Yes. So on the next episode of Geeky Port, we're going to be discussing witches. And hopefully we'll have our mutual friend Maxie with us. We were all on board for ghosts, I think, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good discussion. But yeah, again, to go back to the Renaissance fair, like there's so many different kind of fairy costumes. You could have like insect antennae. You could have like these pointed, like these tapered elven ears, or like I saw like cow or like deer ears, which were really interesting. Mostly insect wings, like dragonfly, butterfly, or any kind of like translucent insect.
Yeah,
wings.
usually with like a gossamer type of fabric. I tried to make fairy wings once. It did not go well.
Oh.
Mainly because I kept ripping the fabric.
It's too thin.
I guess you could make that work, but it wasn't what I was going for. And one day I will perfect the skill.
I believe in you.
and I'll wear the wings every day of my life because that's what a responsible adult does.
Of course.
Is dresses as a fairy for their finance job.
Yeah, I'd love to see. There is actually a character called Moth in Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah.
So if I directed a production, I would probably insist that character almost look like an anthropomorphic moth, just to like stay true to that particular.
And then another one would be an anthropomorphic mustard seed. And I don't remember the cobweb.
Yep.
And I think there's another one.
Maybe she could have like 8 legs or something.
Yeah.
Or have like compound eyes or something. So, wrapping up this particular episode, do you have anything to add to the conversation about our diminutive, sometimes allies, the fairies?
Just whenever you throw salt over your shoulder, you might be hitting a fairy.
Ooh.
And you should be careful about that because then not only will they be mad that they got hit in the face with salt, but now they have to count all of it.
Oh.
And then they'll be vengeful against you. So, so never throw salt over your shoulder.
Right.
Ever.
It's
Superstitions, pacha.
Yeah, that's a bad thing to do, and that's where we'll leave it. So don't throw salt over your shoulder for fear of incurring a fairy's wrath. And with that, I bid you all a fond adieu, and catch us again next month for our episode about witches. So, happy Halloween!
Murda Alice Little. Where and when she made the acquaintance of Mr. Howard Phillips Lovecraft is difficult to say.
So how did I get interested in Aleister Crowley? Although, isn't everybody interested in Aleister Crowley? I mean, I knew his reputation of being the arch-occultist of the 20th century, the most evil man who'd ever lived, yada, 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 all of those things that you generally hear about him. He had at various times claimed to have been an agent for British intelligence in the United States during the First World War.
While there's no obvious historical connection, the so-called Great Beast 666 had spent a summer in New Hampshire during the World War.
Why that particular place?
The Ossipee Triangle was a term coined by Ken Moak in 1988 in Info magazine. And we thought, well, we're going to go and try and figure out where it actually starts and stops.
The question we have is, where would somebody place a sacrificial stone table? The other question is, would Aleister Crowley have had any other reason to come, to this area?
Lovecraft was trying to create something that you could never explain. It was never going to be yours no matter how much you thought it was. Whereas Crowley was trying to attract people to the idea that they could have this power and, maybe it could be yours.
The occult magic, cults engaging in human sacrifice, and ancient demon worship. Then again, if that's the recipe, then the whole damn state is one giant mystery hill.
My introduction to weird tales is very definite.
This skeptical viewing reality as fluid.
Whether they were even aware of it, H.P. Lovecraft, Aleister Crowley, Murda Little are all connected with each other.